keep an eye on your legacy endorsing body. What do I mean by that? Now, currently there's the new endorsing bodies that were introduced, but there's still the dozens of the legacy endorsing bodies. Now, the legacy endorsing bodies are those that did not make it through to the new round. Now, many of them are excellent, outstanding, highly professional, but some of them have effectively discontinued their operations or partly discontinued their operations. So what do you do if you're in one of those endorsing bodies? So this is quite a big topic, but the first point I wanted to make is the contact point meetings. So I've been really surprised that a lot of I shouldn't say a lot, at least some of the endorsing bodies, the legacy endorsing bodies, have not been holding the contact point meetings. And that can really cause problems if someone is then switching or applying for indefinite leave to remain. And well, at least one of the endorsing bodies has decided to stop endorsing new applicants, or even new applicants. They're not endorsing new applicants, but they've stopped endorsing their existing cohort. So for new applications, whether it's for extensions or for indefinite leave to remain. So what you might have to do is, if you're in the unfortunate position where you've been doing everything you can, but the endorsing body, your legacy endorsing body, became a legacy endorsing body and hasn't been keeping up with the contact meetings, then I would encourage you to prompt them, although it shouldn't be necessary for you to do this, but to prompt them to have those meetings. And this includes some universities, I'm sorry to say, but some of the universities have not been holding their contact point meetings with their endorsees. And what happens is, when those people switch, especially if they've been endorsed under the startup visa and they've been switching to the Innovator visa, their Home Office is asking now, show evidence of the contact point meetings. Now, I think this is pretty unfair in some cases, because it's not the job of the endorsee to convene the contact point meeting, right? That's a supervisory duty of the endorsing body. It's for them to sort it out. But where they haven't been, or they're not putting appropriate resources into it, then I'd say, yeah, chase them up, make sure that you have the meeting, give them their update. Do they have any issues with it? Are they happy to continue? And the Home Office is basically asking for evidence of the meetings. They seem to be asking at the moment just for evidence of the meeting having taken place. They don't seem to be asking for the actual content of the meeting, as for what was said. I suppose they deem there's a bit of a margin of deference. They deem that to be within the ambit of the endorsing body, but they want to see that the contact meetings have taken place. So if you look at the guidance for legacy endorsing bodies, especially as it was before the legislative changes, then the duty was to keep in touch with the endorsees. So it was kind of left open as to what that looked like. But after the law changed, there was a formal requirement for contact point meetings. So my first point is that, just to avoid that becoming an issue later on, make sure that you prompt your legacy endorsing body to have a contact point meeting, and really that should take place every 6 months. But if it hasn't, then make sure you have a meeting with them, especially if you're switching into another category. I mean, some of the universities were endorsing startup applicants, but never had the ability to endorse for the Innovator founder visa. That means that the startup cohort would need to switch into one of the new endorsing bodies when the time comes. And at that point of the assessment, the Home Office is asking, have you had your contact point meetings? And if the university has just taken a lackadaisical approach to it and just said, well, we're now a legacy endorsing body, we're not putting any more resources into it, then that might be a resolvable issue, in that you can go to them and say, look, I can see we haven't had a meeting, let's have our meeting. So that's the first issue with the legacy endorsing bodies. Now, in terms of keeping an eye on the legacy endorsing body in other respects. Some of them are very active. In terms of the things I've seen with those that are not very active and not very proactive, I've often seen that the contact point has just disappeared. Or, I won't mention any names, but where they have the ability to endorse for for settlement, but don't want to do it, or don't know that they can do that. So some of the legacy endorsing bodies were able to endorse for settlement. They became a legacy endorsing body, effectively thought that they didn't have to do anything after that. But in fact, they did need to do the contact point meetings, and they were still empowered to endorse the current cohorts for extensions and for settlement. So there's one endorsing body in particular that's been very resistant to endorsing people for settlement. And this is just their current cohort, but they're empowered to do it. And to be frank, they are probably contractually obliged to at least consider people for endorsement under the contracts that the endorsees entered into them with. So you might be in a position where you have to actually educate your legacy endorsing body that they are still empowered to endorse you for settlement. These are the criteria, and they then need to read the legacy endorsing body guidance, and it may be that you can then you can then be endorsed for settlement once they're up to speed again. Now, some of this is just due to sometimes staff changes within these organizations. A member of staff who was dealing with endorsements left, maybe they weren't replaced, or the new person doesn't know as much about it. So I've seen a couple of instances of that, not necessarily with people who I've worked with from the beginning, but where people have come to me at a late stage. They went in with one of these other legacy endorsing bodies, and as I say, at one stage or other, it's kind of there's been a misalignment, and that has to be resolved. So I think the older that the legacy endorsing bodies get, or the further it gets from the point that we switched over to the new ones, the greater the risk that the legacy endorsing bodies won't actually keep up to speed with things. So the vast majority of people aren't affected by these issues, but some people have been, and I've especially seen this on the university front. Universities are very well resourced, and I see no reason why they shouldn't be proactive and professional in their dealings with you, especially given that it involves your visa status. When people have been switching from startup, so I have helped people switch from startup to Innovator, where they've actually switched endorsing bodies. So they've been on the startup with one legacy endorsing body, and they're switching to Innovator with one of the new endorsing bodies. And I've also assisted people where they've been on the Innovator visa route with their legacy endorsing body, and for whatever reason they want to switch to the Innovator founder visa with one of the new endorsing bodies. And in each case, the issue is, well, what progress have you made with the business for which you were endorsed originally? So be prepared to produce any records of that. It doesn't necessarily matter that your original business hasn't turned out as you would expect. I mean, it's accepted that entrepreneurial ventures may fail. In fact, most of them fail, of course. But that's not necessarily a problem. But they do want to see that you've been involved in that venture, that you launched it. If there was revenue, if there was any revenue, then produce evidence of that. If there wasn't, then produce evidence of what they did. So I have had cases where there was no revenue produced. The first startup venture did not work out at all. They still successfully switched endorsing bodies, and either from Innovator to Innovator, or from startup to Innovator. And there haven't been any issues where the venture didn't work out, even where there's been no revenue. But my clients have always been able to produce evidence of their participation in their business and the steps that they have taken. Now, I've mentioned before that this is a bit of an unusual time in the immigration environment, because the Conservative government's trying to reduce immigration numbers ahead of the election. I think after June hopefully there'll be an election in June. If not, then a few months later this year. But I think after that, I think the immigration environment generally will relax, and I imagine that immigration will be more encouraged and more embraced. But at the moment, there is a a push to reduce immigration numbers, and I think that's reflected where there's any discretion exercised. There seems to be the pressure on decision makers to refuse where there are grounds for refusal, perhaps more so at other times. I think it would be a bit naive to think that the political situation doesn't influence some decisions on the ground in that respect. So sometimes might be in a position where you have to review a decision through an admin review to get the right result. But so far, the decisions that I've seen have ultimately worked out to be in my client's favour, even if there's greater scrutiny of decisions generally across the board, and more questions that are asked that require explanation, more documents that are required to be produced, even where an endorsing body has supported someone and issued an endorsement letter. So yeah, those, I hope that gives a picture on how to approach legacy endorsing bodies, that you've got to, in some cases, encourage them along as much as they may have encouraged you along. The main endorsing bodies, I'd say, legacy endorsing bodies, have been fine, and they've been, conscientiously discharging their duties. Hope that helps. If you want to discuss any of the issues arising, I have a consultation service, and you can get me on the link below. You click on the link, select a time to speak with me. As a lawyer, I've assisted many people under both startup and Innovator, and then applying for indefinite leave to remain. Also help people to switch into from Innovator into global talent, and in some cases into the skilled worker route. So yeah, very happy to discuss anything like that with you on my consultation service. Take care. Bye for now.